This episode of Matt's Mysteries contains material that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Matt's Mysteries. I'm Matt, also known as the Blob's stunt double. And before we get started, I just want to say that I am absolutely going to butcher every name and location in this story, so apologies in advance for sucking at words. Anyway, this case has been done and done to death, but I find it pretty interesting nonetheless, so you're getting it from me too. You're welcome. If you like snow, outdoor recreational activities, mystery, and popsicles, then stick around because I'm going to tell you about the Dyatlov Pass incident. In the heart of the Ural Mountains, where the trees whisper ancient secrets and the snow not only exists, but hates you too, a group of 10 ambitious friends embarked on a skiing expedition in the winter of 1959. Now, these weren't mere weekend adventurers. They were seasoned hikers, each wielding a Grade 2 hiking certification like a badge of honor. Under the capable leadership of one Igor Dyatlov, they set their sights on achieving the prestigious Grade 3 ranking, a coveted title that promised not only respect, but also a story worth telling for generations to come. The ultimate goal was to conquer the elusive Otorten, a peak that loomed in the distance like a challenge waiting to be accepted. The expedition required them to traverse a staggering 300 kilometers, or roughly 200 miles, through treacherous terrain that could inspire even the most optimistic snowman to shiver in fear. I mean, I get it. Some of them just can't let it go. Anyway, on January 25th, 1959, the group arrived in the small town of Ivdel, a quaint settlement that seemed to embrace the harsh cold as if it were an old friend. As a stereotypical Canadian, I can relate. Wooden houses dotted the landscape, and the air was filled with the crunch of snow underfoot, a soundtrack of winter that promised both adventure and peril. After this brief stop, the group took a truck to Vizhai, known as the last inhabited settlement to the north before plunging into the wild. As they departed Ivdel, excitement bubbled in the air, spurred on by tales of past adventures, dreams of future conquests, and the camaraderie that bound them together. They were young, spirited, and, like some athletes and young people often are, seemingly invincible. But little did they know that this expedition would morph from an exhilarating adventure into a chilling mystery that would haunt them forever. Their trek officially began on January the 27th, and spirits were high as they set out into the winter wonderland. The sun shone bright, the snow glimmered like 1,000 tiny diamonds, and laughter echoed throughout the pines. However, just a day into their adventure, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, was struck by a debilitating case of joint and knee pain. Suffering from what can only be described as a severe case of, "I'd rather be back at the lodge," and also considering you kind of need your knees and joints to hike through treacherous mountains, he decided to turn back. As he waved goodbye, a sense of foreboding began to settle over the group, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next twist in the story. Yuri's departure marked the first hint that the mountains might have plans of their own, plans that didn't include camaraderie or warm drinks by the fire. He might have saved himself from the mountain's wrath, but for the remaining 9, this was just the beginning of a harrowing tale that would spiral into the realm of the inexplicable. With Yuri's absence, the atmosphere shifted. However, the group forged ahead, still full of bravado, but shadowed by the specter of uncertainty. By February the 1st, the group reached the infamous Dyatlov Pass, which was totally not called that at the time. Here, nature unleashed its full fury, sending snowstorms that obscured their path and warped their sense of direction. Visibility shrank to nearly zero, and the comforting sounds of laughter and friendly banter faded into an eerie silence. What was once a playful adventure quickly turned into a frozen nightmare as the group realized that they had veered far off course, moving not toward Otorten, but toward a grim summit, Katabatic. I'm sorry. This mountain, ominously dubbed Dead Mountain by the indigenous Mansi people, loomed over them like a foreboding giant. And if that's not a harbinger of doom, I don't know what is. Unfazed by the mountain's ominous reputation, Dyatlov made a split decision that has been hotly debated ever since, to set up camp right there on the slope of this foreboding peak. Yeah, I don't get it either. Some argue he was merely looking for a flat surface, while others believe he underestimated the mountain's thirst for adventure. Listen, I'm not some sort of expert hiker, climber, or adventurous person. I am safely and happily sitting in a chair just west of Toronto. So I may be way off base in my not so expert assumption, but wouldn't setting up shop on the slope of like this insurmountable peak be kind of a rookie move? Oh well, with the snow swirling around them and the wind howling like a banshee, they pitched their tent, perhaps envisioning a cozy night, with them doubling back toward their original destination once the conditions were a little more forgiving. As day turned to night, the world outside their tent transformed into a frigid prison, a brutal reminder of nature's unforgiving wrath. The campers huddled together, trying to keep the chill at bay and keep morale as high as possible, and they attempted to ignore the oppressive weight of the blizzard just outside their tent. As the snow piled higher, the group felt an unsettling sense of isolation creeping in. Would they survive the night? Would their tent hold? These were thoughts that danced at the edges of their minds, teasing like a playful snowflake that couldn't settle. Prior to embarking on their journey, Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram upon completion of their hike. However, as days passed with nothing but radio silence, nearly a month by the time concern settled in, fear began to loom larger than the mountains themselves. Concerned friends and family rallied together, fueled by a mix of dread and determination, to search for their missing adventurers. On February the 26th, a volunteer search party was mobilized, trekking into the same perilous pass that the adventurers had traversed weeks prior. What they discovered would send chills down the spine of even the most stoic investigator. The campsite was a scene straight out of a horror film. The tent had been slashed from the inside, as if the hikers were fleeing from something. Was it an avalanche? A bear? Some sort of very angry, feral mountain man? Most of their belongings lay abandoned within the tent, including shoes, because who needs those when the snow is a cozy alternative, right? Following a peculiar set of footprints, some barefoot, some in socks, and others in a single boot, creating a bizarre fashion statement, the search party trekked into the dark embrace of the nearby forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky, and the air was thick with an unsettling silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter of this tragic story to unfold. It wouldn't be long before the search party began locating the missing hikers, and the state they were found in is both horrific and incredibly tragic. The first two were discovered at the base of a cedar tree near a makeshift fire pit. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonashenko were discovered in nothing but their underpants. It was believed that they were the first to succumb to nature's icy grip. Perhaps as the hypothermia set in, they were lulled into a false sense of security by the flames. As the search progressed, investigators located 3 more hikers: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogrova, and Rustem Slobodin. Again, I'm sorry. They had all succumbed to hypothermia as well, while trying to return to their tent. They were found scattered across the snow, a grim tableau of desperation, each one seemingly frozen in time, caught in a final, desperate struggle against the relentless cold. It was at this point when a horrifying realization set in. These were skilled adventurers, individuals trained to handle extreme, debilitating conditions, yet they were now victims of a merciless winter. To nobody's surprise, hypothermia was common among the initial victims, leading investigators to wonder how a group of skilled hikers could end up in such dire straits, their adventure morphing from a quest for glory into a desperate and utterly terrifying fight for survival. The psychological toll of isolation and fear weighed heavily on their minds, a pressure cooker that could explode at any moment. Were the hikers losing hope? Were they second-guessing their decisions? These questions, and many others, loomed larger than the snow-covered peaks before them. Then came a pretty shocking twist. The remaining 4 hikers were found under a thick blanket of snow, lying in a ravine that seemed to mock their plight. These bodies, unlike the previous ones, told a very different story, one of extreme, violent encounters and unexplained circumstances. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had suffered a catastrophic skull fracture, while Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov bore rather chilling injuries, a crushing force akin to a car crash, which, given the circumstances, is super weird and highly unsettling. Ludmila was particularly unfortunate. She was missing her tongue and various facial features, leading to wild speculation about the scavengers that may have come across the remains. I mean, this is actually fairly common when it comes to scavengers coming across the deceased. However, it is nonetheless tragic and super unfortunate. As if this tale wasn't bizarre enough, investigators also discovered traces of radiation on one hiker's clothing, alongside unsettling reports of glowing orange orbs in the sky during that time. Okay. Did they cross paths with something extraterrestrial? Or was it merely a freak occurrence? The high levels of radiation raised eyebrows in a country still grappling with the shadow of its own nuclear ambitions. You gotta remember, this is the Soviet Union in 1959. The eerie reports of orange orbs sparked debates and conspiracy theories that would echo for decades. I mean, for real, if you look at conspiracy icebergs, it's one of the first things that pops up, and the orbs is a huge point of contention. Anyway, was there something more to this tragic mystery, or were they simply the unfortunate victims of nature's wrath? Furthermore, some hikers appeared to have developed an eerie orange hue to their skin. Their hair inexplicably turned gray, which sounded less like a natural occurrence and more like the side effects of some poorly tested science experiment gone horribly wrong. The bizarre circumstances fueled a multitude of theories, with some suggesting government cover-ups, secret military tests, or even alien involvement. Because who doesn't love a good conspiracy? If you guys listened to the last episode where I talked about aliens, you'll know that ancient astronaut theorists always believe that everything that has ever happened to humanity, good and bad, is because of aliens. Anyway, as news of the tragedy spread, interest in the Dyatlov Pass incident grew, captivating amateur sleuths and serious investigators alike. Some theorists suggested that the injuries could have resulted from an avalanche or some sort of similar freak accident, while others proposed that a sudden, overwhelming force had struck the group. However, the more sensational theories began to take hold, fueled by the fascination with the supernatural and the unexplained. The idea that the hikers may have encountered a malevolent force or perhaps a mysterious government experiment quickly became a popular narrative. And I mean, some conspiracy theories are kind of fun to look into, but let's be real. Decades passed, and the tragic mystery continued to captivate the imagination of many. In 2015, the investigative committee of the Russian Federation even reopened the investigation, leading to a flurry of theories ranging from secret military tests to alien encounters. Again, as researchers dug deeper, they uncovered new details, fueling the fire of speculation. Was there a hidden agenda? Were they subjects in some sort of covert experiment? The possibilities were seemingly endless, and each theory seemed wilder than the last. Finally, in a dramatic conclusion that would make any conspiracy theorist giddy with delight, the Russian government declared that the hikers died due to a compelling force. What that force was remains a tantalizing mystery, leaving investigators and enthusiasts alike to ponder. Was it nature, a freak accident, or perhaps the whims of a capricious mountain spirit? Some skeptics, like yours truly, suggested that the injuries could have resulted from an avalanche or some sort of similar accident. However, others were not so quick to dismiss the idea that something more nefarious was at play. The case of the Dyatlov Pass incident serves as a haunting reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the thin line between adventure and disaster. In the end, it's a story of ambition, camaraderie, and the eternal quest for knowledge and adventure, one that has captured the imaginations of generations. As we reflect on the fate of Igor Dyatlov and his fellow companions, we are left with a chilling truth. The mountains can be both beautiful and deadly, and sometimes the greatest adventure is simply surviving to tell the tale. Me, I'm going to continue to sit in my chair west of Toronto, rambling about mysteries. While the Dyatlov Pass incident may remain shrouded in mystery, the tale of these brave souls will endure, whispered among explorers and dreamers, a chilling story that echoes through the ages. Listen, whether you're a skeptic or a believer in all things supernatural, one thing is certain: the Ural Mountains are a captivating backdrop for a tragedy that continues to intrigue, terrify, and inspire awe. So the next time you zip up your parka and lace up your hiking boots, remember the 9 adventurers who dared to tread where few would venture, and heed the warnings that nature whispers in the wind. After all, adventure can be exhilarating, but it can also be dangerous and deadly, and the call of the wild is not one to be taken lightly. With that bit of poetry out of the way, let's move on to the lightning round. We're going to cover 5 theories, and hopefully they'll help us get to the bottom of this mystery. Our first theory points to an avalanche. In reality, this theory has the most credibility, if we're being honest. This theory basically states that on the night of the tragedy, the weather was violent and snowy, with a snowstorm blowing through the area, with temperatures dropping well below -40 degrees Celsius. The high winds and violent storm may have triggered an avalanche that would have enveloped the area before settling in the weeks before the search party arrived. It is largely speculated that the snow that the portion of mountainside the hikers set their tents up on may have been snow that just wasn't ideal for setting up such a camp. It should be noted that the ICRF ruled this to be the case in 2019, which I didn't include in the earlier portion of the script because I didn't really want to spoil this portion. Anyway, in January of 2021, a scientific model was published to demonstrate that this, combined with the strong winds moving down the slope of the mountain, may have triggered what is known as a slab avalanche. This type of avalanche can happen in areas where avalanches are a rarity, and are even known to cause fatal injuries similar to those seen in some of the hikers. Alright, let's put our creative detective hats on. I'm going to try and paint a speculative picture of what could have possibly happened. During the night of the storm, the already weakened snow base would have slightly shifted, pushing the tent fabric and waking the sleeping hikers within. They likely would have panicked and began evacuating as quick as humanly possible. Given the fact that taking their time was not an option, they chose to cut through the tent to escape, fleeing with very little, if any, clothing or supplies. They then headed down the slope and built a fire at the base of a large cedar tree, an area they may have believed was safe from the avalanche. This would be where some would perish due to hypothermia, as they were found in just underwear and pajamas. The 3 that were found en route back to the tent were likely going to retrieve supplies and clothing to keep them and their companions warm. They were found in poses that suggest that they may have collapsed from exhaustion and froze to death before they could reach the tent. Finally, it is believed that the final 4, who were somewhat equipped in better clothing and footwear, set out to find a better location to re-establish their camp somewhere deeper in the forest. It is here that they would meet their end, falling through a pocket of snow above a nearby stream. The impact on the rocks below would have resulted in their injuries, and the fact that a fresh blanket of snow fell in the weeks following concealed their bodies for nearly 2 months. Our second theory points to infrasound, and it's pretty cool. This theory comes from Donnie Eicher and states that the wind going around the mountain range the hikers were climbing created something called a Kármán vortex street. That's a very fancy science person way of saying a repeating pattern of swirling vortices that can produce a sound-like phenomenon. Eicher believes that this created something called infrasound, which has the capability to induce panic attacks in humans. Bet you didn't know that. You might be familiar with a very specific type of infrasound that occurs somewhere around 19 Hz. This has the capability of inducing fear and dread in the listener, all while resonating at a pitch that is basically inaudible to the human ear. If this were the case, this would have caused the hikers to flee their tent in a delirious state of panic, down the slope toward the forest edge. Once at the edge of the forest, the sound would have subsided, leading to the group regaining their composure. They then sadly passed from hypothermia after they failed to locate their camp in the darkness. The 3 that sustained physical injuries likely fled further into the forest and fell into a ravine, injuring themselves on the rocks below. Alright, did you feel any sort of unease or panic listening to this episode? If so, it's either because the details of this case are pretty gnarly, or because I may or may not have added a layer of 19 Hz infrasound into the music for this episode. Did I do that to prove a point? I'll never tell. Wink. The third theory points to something known as Katabatic winds. This theory proposes that a Katabatic wind, also known as a drainage wind, was the cause of the bizarre circumstances surrounding the hikers' deaths. A Katabatic wind essentially carries high-density air from a higher elevation down a slope under the force of gravity. It is also believed that sudden Katabatic winds can be extremely violent and would have made shelter inside the tent nearly impossible. Due to this, the most rational course of action would be to cover the tent in snow and retreat to the forest for cover. This also may explain why many of the essential belongings were left in the tent. However, it fails to account for why the tent was cut open from the inside. Cause if they were planning on returning after the winds died down, why destroy their one and only means of shelter by cutting the tent open? Alright, let's get conspiratorial. Our fourth theory points to covert military tests and a cover-up. Many speculate that the hikers fell victim to a chance encounter with a military exercise that was covered up to remove any culpability and accountability from those involved. There is a possibility that they were in the path of a routine Soviet parachute mine exercise. If this is true, the hikers would have been awoken by the sounds of many loud explosions just overhead. Obviously terrified because loud explosions, the hikers would have panicked and fled the tent in whatever they were wearing or could grab. After enduring the bombardment at the bottom of the hill, the hikers would attempt to return to the tent to retrieve appropriate clothing and supplies, but would sadly succumb to hypothermia and die. There are a number of records of parachute mines being tested in this area around the time the hikers were on their adventure. Fun fact, parachute mines actually detonate while descending through the air, rather than upon impact with the ground, and would have produced shockwaves that could have been the cause behind the physical injuries seen on 3 of the hikers. Furthermore, this would likely explain the glowing orange orbs seen in the area, meaning they weren't UFOs. They were just mines being detonated in the air above the mountain. Adding to this theory, and I guess the conspiracy, it is believed that some radiological weapons were also tested in the area. This would also explain why one of the hikers had high levels of radiation on their clothing, but fails to explain why only one of them had traces of this radiation. Think about it. If radiological weapons were indeed being tested, then all members of the expedition should have had their clothing blanketed with radiation. At varying levels, sure, but radiation nonetheless. The orange skin and gray hair is likely due to the bodies going through an accelerated form of mummification, given the climate and environment they perished in, but I suppose may have also been accelerated due to any radiation the bodies may have been exposed to. Alright, knowing me and my strange love for cryptids, you had to know this was the 5th theory. If you just slapped your keyboard and shouted Yeti into the void, you're right. This theory comes from a 2014 Discovery Channel documentary titled Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives. That's your first red flag. With the nosedive Discovery has taken in its content over the years, using this as a theory is like using ancient aliens to prove that extraterrestrial intervention gave Alexander the Great superpowers. Or like using Ghost Adventures to prove that Zach Baggins knows what he's doing. Okay, that last one was probably a bit mean. Anyway, this theory is more for fun, so let's talk about the Yeti. The show posits that the physical injuries sustained by the 3 hikers were the result of trauma at the hands of a superhuman, inhuman, cryptid-like creature. Many Discovery Channel Yeti attack theorists believe that the hikers cut through their tent to escape an onslaught by one or more Yeti, and that in their escape, they had either frozen to death or were attacked and killed by the aforementioned Bigfoot cousin. If we're being real, the only thing that even remotely backs up this theory comes from interviews with 2 individuals who claim to be some of the first responders from the first search party. They stated that they found footprints larger than any humans. That's it. If a Yeti really decided to attack their camp, why would the party members start a small fire at the base of a cedar tree less than 1,500 meters away from their tent? The documentary also claims that during the expeditions near the area, they recorded howling sounds that couldn't be tied to any known animal species. There is also an image circulating showing a shadowy and seemingly large humanoid figure standing near a tree, which some speculate as being the Yeti in question. I personally believe that this could entirely be one of the hikers simply posing for a photo, with the photographer standing downhill in such a way that makes the subject seem much larger than they really are. You also gotta remember this was 1959, so the photo obviously looks like a potato. Although, when people take pictures of cryptids, they usually look like potatoes. So, maybe it was Yeti? No, I'm just messing with you. It absolutely was not the Yeti. What do you think happened? Did the 9 hikers fall prey to a freak avalanche? Or was it another rare phenomenon at play? Were they killed by military parachute mine testing, the victims of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or were they attacked by a relative of arguably the most famous cryptid on Earth? Personally, I'm actually going to combine 2 theories together for my own headcanon. I honestly believe that a slab avalanche has the most weight to it, and you could probably factor in either the Katabatic winds or infrasound as further salt in the wound that made survival nearly impossible. So, that's the story I'm going with. But, what do you think? Thank you so much for tuning in to today's mystery. If there's a mystery you'd like me to cover, don't hesitate to leave a comment on the video. If you like what you saw and are interested in learning about more mysteries from a cartoon detective, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll post once a week and will occasionally post twice if I'm feeling extra rowdy. So get ready, because there are a lot of mysteries for me to share. Until the next one, this is Matt telling you to stay mysterious.